This podcast was recorded on June 5th, 2020. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and people outside the binary. This is Less Stupid with Thomas Hiura, a show that's completely uncut, uncensored, and unsure if I'm going to get a little sweaty in the sun during this, honestly. But I sweat a lot, so I'll probably will. But here I am today with Candice King. Candice is a former city council candidate here in Ward 1 in Eugene, and she works at Homes for Good, which is a public, gosh, I don't even know that much about it. I just know you guys do Homes for Good.
Well, every county has a public housing authority. That's what we are for Lane County. Mm-hmm. Every county has a public housing authority. So we've been we rebranded a couple of years ago. So that's why we used to be HACSA, the Housing and Community Services Administration of Lane County. And then in order to increase our ability to do public-private partnerships and increase public visibility, they rebranded, and so we're Homes for Good now.
Right on.
Portland has Home Forward,
So every county in the state of Oregon has a public housing authority?
Every county in the United States.
In the whole country?
I mean, there are some counties that are conglomerated because they have smaller populations, but yes, essentially I'm sure there's an anomaly somewhere, but every incorporated county in the United States would have a housing authority that serves it.
I wonder if there's even places like Malheur County or something in Eastern Oregon where it's just like one person or two people are operating that.
There are some small housing authorities. Like Lynn, Benton County, for instance, is a combined one. Okay. I think Malheur has maybe 2 counties or 3 counties within that authority. Yeah.
Right on. Well, I want to ask you out the gate or off the bat. I just mixed up idioms.
Out the gate, off the bat.
Yep. What's a controversial opinion that you have about anything?
Oh, boy. It's hard for me to necessarily know what is controversial about my opinions because I feel like everything is going to be controversial from someone's perspective, right?
Sure.
So I guess I would say one that really puzzles people about why I would pursue this as somebody with a background in economics is like the removal of growth, economic growth, as a primary functioning principle of like what we do to produce, to provide goods and services, to function as a society.
I would say that's very controversial because there are a lot of people who are caught up squarely in the idea that GDP equals the well-being of society, and
I don't know how you could be at this point. But
right, exactly. I mean, people have been doing a pretty good job, hopefully, of bringing to light that, we can measure happiness in more direct ways, gross national happiness. But it is true. When I was in junior in high school, we had IB film studies, and we watched this documentary I loved called The Age of Stupid. And it's a climate documentary, and it stars Pete Postlethwaite, and he is basically even 50 or 60 years into the future, looking back on all this archival footage of demonstrating why people really knew and had no excuse for not acting on climate change, but they just kept doing the things that they were doing. And when I say that, I tend to not mean individuals and poor people making decisions about transportation and things like that. It's more about large entities, governments and corporations not doing anything real because there is a tension sometimes between economic growth and climate policy when you've got companies that are advocating really hard to be able to pollute as much as they want.
Sure. So there's every space or every nation, every country, every state kind of goes through these different periods of economic development, right? Mm-hmm. So we have this, for lack of a better term, would be a primitive stage of economic functioning, but that's like a really not unpopular, but it's a really inappropriate term. It's not accurate. It's like a more traditional stage of economic development, living off the land, agrarianism, and or being a hunter-gatherer. We talk about that from being the beginning to where we are today, which is post-industrial, like crypto exchange society,
Sure.
almost, and like my partner always uses the word postmodern. In the most postmodern of senses, people are making money through delivering goods and services that nobody thought anybody would ever want, and we certainly do not need. And so all of the different stages between there, I mean, there is a like level of functioning and economies of scale that you kind of reach, and then you would naturally, presumptively transition into the next stage of function. But what we've done with American industrial capitalism is like we accelerated really quickly, and it's just Western industrial capitalism in general.
Sure.
We had a quick acceleration after the initial industrial period started. And then we moved into an imperial industrial system, and hyper growth, right? And
Sure.
and that's something that you can just anticipate when you have so many people working together for, to create something, which is, in a short history of what the United States is and the Western hemisphere, Western civilization is, like, we did that. But when you think about the scale over time,
Right.
There's something in there where we missed a mark where it's like, well, okay, we've reached this economies of scale. Now we should move on to the next level of production or the next level of economic development and delivery of goods and services. And what we've done is we've continued to find ways to perpetuate what is, I think, like a less fruitful way of using the goods and resources that we have left in a post-industrial era, and clinging to that so that people who are invested in that, people who own that formation of our economic model, can continue to extract profits until the very end. And the very end, unfortunately for them, is, or for us, is when they ostensibly use the last of the useful resources and then finally move on to the next stage, which would be more environmentally stable or sustainable, right? I don't know.
Sure.
I could go on and on and on.
And that's the point. It's a podcast, so
Oh
I'm
my God.
happy that you are. But it does remind me of a quote from that documentary that touched my heart so much, and it was, "Capitalism promotes an ever-expanding growth on one not expanding planet."
Yeah, we live on a finite sphere.
Absolutely. And so, one thing that AOC in Congress talks about, too, is that so it's expensive to invest in some of the Green New Deal policies she promotes that I think would actually meet the scale of the climate crisis with some policy that would actually make a big enough dent.
Right.
But it's arguably more expensive to not do those things. It's just you're kicking the can down the road, and So it is true that we are going to reach a finite point and recognize that our resources are finite. And so it just doesn't make any sense, even if you are a more conservative person. I mean, you want to, conserve what we have in this planet that we're able to.
Yeah, and keep up the prevailing status quo, too.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't do that if everything comes crashing down.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Gosh. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that in thinking about what economic system that I appreciate the most, we are so bifurcated into you're either a capitalist or you're a socialist Marxist. And what do you think about that? I mean, because there is such demonization that comes with either one of those things, if you kind of depending on where you live and who you interact with in this country.
Well, so here comes unpopular and controversial opinion number 2, like white settler colonialism, Western hegemony controls the delivery of those sorts of ideas and concepts.
Sure.
But we know that by focusing in that narrow sort of myopic lens of the way society functions, the way we produce, the way we distribute goods and services, even the moralistic function of society, we are missing out on so many other potential or existing models and layers of function and ways of organization or of organizing. That was actually like my primary focus in studies in economics. I didn't finish my master's because
cool. I didn't finish my master's either. Yeah, air high five.
Yay!
I might though at some point. We'll see. mine was going to be in education, and I was really, really stressed out. I was having some serious mental health challenges living in New York City and having it be so different than here. And I had a professor who was like a transphobic bully, and it was weird.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was like...
Call that motherfucker out. Who was it?
Well, her name was Christine Barron. And not only was that the case, but I was able to go and get a Title IX complaint, and the school ruled in my favor and was like, yeah, we need to make this person go through sensitivity courses and apologize to you, etc. And then they were made the interim chair of my program. So they were like punished within that process and then promoted within a more effectual process. So that was Columbia University for you. Don't you love the ivory tower?
Damn, I really wanted to go to Columbia at one point.
Yeah, there are a lot of cool people who have gone there, but boy, it was real different than my undergrad. My undergrad was a small liberal arts college in Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota.
Oh.
Yeah, so 45 minutes out of the Twin Cities, which Twin Cities right now is experiencing a ton of unrest, but also a lot of inspiring and really just like human moments in the community where, I don't know, it's been a real challenge to be distant from it. One of the things that I think we're not getting from our general, I don't know, mainstream media, corporate media, summaries of what's happening is how much of a food desert it is inside the cities.
Oh, in Minneapolis?
Yeah.
St. Paul? Yeah. I mean, that was like, so if you look at food studies or like food security studies, and this all feeds into the thought that I didn't finish, so I'll try to like roll all that in together.
No worries.
So, yeah, the urban centers, I like to use air quotes a lot because I'm just like, I don't know, urban is the word everybody understands, but places where there's lots of people of color living in concentrated numbers are considered urban. In those places, the infrastructure that is put in place is bare minimum in order to sustain a place to, house people who were, who are de facto not considered going to be like not going to be like the most beneficial, the best labor to exploit. So it's like, here's some labor to exploit, but actually it's not the labor we want.
Sure.
So we don't actually care if that labor force or that set of the population has the resources they need to live a good life in their neighborhood. We want them to have to go out of those communities to be able to purchase the things that they need, to get groceries, and having a food desert in a very high concentrated population creates a level of like multiple layers of animosity,
of course,
and competition, and a constraint on resources that pushes people many people into a mode of desperation. That's not to say that there's going to be inherently problems within those communities where there are food deserts, but I have to say that like I benefited from always being able to have a good meal and never having to question that. I didn't ever have to think about taking like 2 buses or drive a car somewhere or probably to get my groceries. Like I could always walk and get the food that I need for my family, and that's still the case today.
Good.
So imagine being in that position where you're people stacked on people stacked on people, and everything is concrete around you because that was the cheapest way to put housing blocks in place, and then they didn't even consider how you were going to get your food, and you have nowhere to grow food, and you don't have parking, and you don't have a car, and so like it's a tinderbox, right?
And like, so when I was in New York, they wanted to raise the price for the MTA again, the subway. And it's like, that is so essential for people to get, cheap food, to be able to go over to the Dollar Tree or the Costco, which I went to in East Harlem when I was living kind of right outside West Harlem. And gosh, it's so true, though, what you said about the infrastructure being so bare minimum. And that's so one of the things that's happening in our dialogue where, for once again, for what will probably be a brief period of time, people of color and Black and Indigenous people, predominantly Black people today, are actually able to have like it's a news story, like what's going on in their communities, like it's in mainstream news. But a lot of the like comments you see on social media and stuff are just like, gosh, oh, all lives matter. We need to move beyond race. Like, why is this so divisive and stuff? And it's like, it's such a Jedi mind trick that the status quo has played to be able to try to warp that rhetoric in order to make it sound that way, because the reality is that we can't solve the specific issues that are going on in these communities if we erase that, if we just try to address like, oh, everything's equal and let's just like move forward like together, and like we will get to a place together where it benefits everybody if the communities that have been systematically oppressed are actually brought to some kind of a decent living condition.
Well, so I'm oriented in a way, like I want to attack almost.
Sure.
It's not because I don't agree with you. I think like ultimately we agree on everything, but it's just like
you can disagree
the approach
hardcore.
to language. You know, the idea, like this is my criticism of white settler colonialism. It's my criticism of white supremacy culture in general, is that it fails to like adequately articulate the material constructs, the conditions that brought us to the place where we are today.
Okay.
So like not having those ideas, stripping culture from people in order for them to achieve whiteness, for them to assimilate, and then that assimilation is the measure of success, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're white passing in this country, you know, maybe you were Irish and you got here or something.
I'm pretty white passing. I know about it.
You know, and like if you're white passing, then no matter what your people's collectively and individually immigration story is, if they were white passing, then there is an option for them to achieve a level of like ethnic neutrality that could potentially allow them to access, you know, more power, have more respect,
sure.
Not be criminalized, not be targeted. But if you are black, if you have dark skin,
sure.
brown skin, red skin, black skin, in this country, you are arriving or you are existing or you were born into a place where the entire foundation of the society, of the civilization that was founded there is based off of theft, exploitation, murder, slavery, and ostensibly to attempts permanent, a propensity and a necessity to expand profit margins and wealth accumulation for the people who own the means of production, to squeeze labor from the beginning and to perpetually and then squeeze labor at the end. And when I say the end is because I believe it is also, we're in a period of late capitalism. But going back to your question,
I appreciate what you said about people who are white passing, because like the media, like commercials, like they love racially ambiguous looking people. They really do.
It's one of my, it's like, well, we want visibility for black people. And it's one of my pet peeves is like, well, we don't see black bodies in the media. And the first thing that they did, or the first thing that the media at large, producers at large started to do was figure out a way to market to us with our black bodies. Okay. So it wasn't, like the visibility, the representation, all of the things that we, have been fighting for and accomplishing. Like that message is always watered down through this lens of like, how can we exploit the transaction here to make sure that it's valuable enough for somebody to do it, and so like that just goes all the way back to the very beginning of when they first brought slaves over to the Western Hemisphere, when they from Africa, and realized, oh wait, this is a different situation. We're here now. There's been slavery forever, but by the way, there is a clear visual distinction between the people who have all the power and the people who have none, and we can exploit that place, that space that of difference that has, in general not existed, especially not on a large scale prior to that for humanity, to say, hey, now that we're here, actually, by the way, you're not just here to do labor for us. You're also not a human being. You're lesser than a human being.
Right.
That shit is what this country was founded on.
Right.
I mean, when settlers got here from England, before the transatlantic slave trade, they made, well, if you just read like 1491, you read compared to like later Columbus, his journals and people, the Jesuits, there was this question as to whether or not the people who were here were actually human.
Right.
And so like that dehumanization factor, that founding principle, and then the idea that if we can dehumanize people, then we can exploit them, and we can exploit them for our understanding, and also exploit them for our benefit and our purposes, and we can exploit them to accumulate wealth. And their values are different than mine. I'm going to use my values, assert my values, which are ostensibly more violent, when against a set of people or people who do not understand what I mean when I talk about ownership.
Right.
What is permanence? Where are we going?
Sure.
So like.
Well, honestly, one of my favorite early 1400s, I guess proto woke Bay white allies was a guy named Bartolome de las Casas.
Oh yeah.
And he wrote the book a brief account of the destruction of the Indies. And it was basically, he was like, hey, I'm a religious person and I'm here with the genocidalist, he didn't use that word, Chris Columbus, who
Cristoforo Colombo,
sure,
the Italian Spaniard.
And he basically was like, God is gonna come down on our asses for what we're doing to these human beings.
Right.
And so he was scared as hell about that. He lost hella sleep over it. And so
as he should have.
There's that. There's also when you speed forward to the late 1700s, I recently learned that John Adams didn't enslave people. So the idea that you know what, all those people back then, those wealthy property owning white men, they just were all slave owners, and you just got to judge it within that context and say that the other things they did were still good, but you can't blame them for that. They needed that to have power. It's like, that's not historically true. Like, people were making conscious decisions about humanity that also.
Well, I mean, it was ascientific, right? Like the Age of Enlightenment only enlightened them enough to where they could, be satisfied that they had the most information, and the best information.
How self-serving.
Yes, but I feel like I lost the this thread that you tapped on that I just really want to get to, which is
we got lots of threads.
We as America cannot fix the problem of Black people being marginalized, subjugated, murdered, exploited, killed, psychologically traumatized perpetually through generations, if we don't talk about where we came from.
Sure.
If we don't talk about how we got here, if we don't talk about call out the people and the constructs and the principles and the ascientific shit, the whole schools of thoughts, academia, everything like that got us to this point. So it's more succinctly, I like to say, if we don't deal with our shit, then we're going to be living in it, and it's going to pile up around us and suffocate us.
Right.
And that's where we are right now. And we've been here for a long time. But the other issue is us fixing things, like saying, well, to simplify this, people criticize Black Lives Matter because they don't know what they want. They are destructive, or they are just indignant, or they are, they haven't been hazed enough yet by society.
President of the United States glorified the hell out of the Reopen America people who were screaming in the faces of cops with guns and stuff. But anybody advocating for Black lives, even peacefully, is a thug.
Right.
And that's that's rhetoric coming out of the President of the United States office.
And the rhetoric is always fucking bad, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
It's just because people don't understand language. They don't understand what it means. It's well, they don't know what they want and we can't fix it. No, we are all we're together, right? You're making us they, and that's the fucking problem. Right? It's well, they haven't achieved this an acceptable level of my respect to societal status yet in order for me to pay attention and try to do something. And honestly, just talking about today, talking about right now, talking about what I see in the streets here in Eugene, and then what I observe across the United States, like we're at a tipping point. And I think my millennial generation.
Yeah, we've had 7 days in a row of like marching in the streets here in Eugene.
I think there's a critical mass of white people who are willing to reconcile with the shit because they're tired of having to deal with this cyclical crap of like over and over again. This is why we get incrementalism, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, us responding and solving the demands of the Black Lives Matter protesters is going to give us some incremental bullshit. It's not going to like provide us with the fundamental, what I believe is necessary cultural reimagination of this whole society. Because when we talk about where we were founded, when we talk about how that, what the implications are for our bodies, for our families, for our opportunities, for, for everything that surrounds us together. Like, we have this very limited notion of what good is, what success is, what's possible, what our best practices, what should we have done, where should we be going? And we've been going in a direction steered by people who are, whether consciously, subconsciously, or just by design, like de facto under this idea, operating under this notion of and practice of exploitation, even in the most minuscule sense, like I'm not going to do something unless I get an additional gain out of it, and that or extra consideration in the contract. What motivates me? One of my favorite examples, and this is it's tangential to Black lives, of course, because we're all together and we're all tangential. We're in a sphere. It's finite. We're not going nowhere. We don't have spaceships that are going to take us out. And if we did, my black ass ain't getting on one, I mean, if you do something, you know what I mean? Like, and if I do get on one, it's because I'm going to serve somebody right.
Holy moly.
So the one of the, because I work in housing, right? And so one of my primary criticisms of the whole way that we approach dealing with the housing crisis, dealing with the fact that we have, we're coming to terms with the fact that of enclosure, is that the justification for housing people without any and not trying to be gatekeepers to housing people and just trying to make sure, initiatives and efforts on a state and functional governmental level to make sure that there's housing for everyone, housing first, right?
Sure.
The justifying principle that tipped us over the edge of that, or the finding, was that it is cheaper to house somebody than it is to keep them homeless on the street. It's it's like anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 a year less expensive because of the utilization of public services.
The financial motive comes in and supersedes. Money talks.
All the transaction costs. Like, who the fuck needed to wait until, until we figured out that it was like costing us too much money to justify making sure that people had a basic necessity of life, which is shelter.
Sure.
So there's just, we have a whole lot of shit to deal with. And so I guess that just brings me to like back to every point that I always try to make, like, it's too late for this system. That is not what Black Lives Matter protests are asking for. That is not the main, like, what we're trying to assert. We're basically saying, please don't kill us.
Sure.
Please stop killing us. Well, we were saying that 5 years ago. Please stop killing us.
Sure.
We were saying that 30 years ago, 40
Martin.
years ago, 400 years ago. We're still saying that now. And now, people are like, oh, it's boiling over. This is I hate cliche terms because I always forget them, and then and then I just sound like inarticulate, right? But it's
tipping point, boiling point,
all of those things. And the reason is, it's like, who the fuck has time to ask anymore? Nobody has time for that shit. Like, we literally don't have time. Like, we might die and you'll take our time away from us. And all humans want the same thing.
Sure.
We all need the same things: food, shelter, water, clean water,
yeah.
Right? And we're all
looking
the same
for
things.
Escape from many of the same things too.
Right. We all want the same things: dignity,
sure.
A sense of achievement,
sense of community,
happiness,
togetherness.
Yes, community, togetherness, security and safety for our children, for our families, for our communities, for ourselves. and joy. We all want to have enjoyment. We all want to, it would be overgeneralization to say we all want to have love, because a lot of people decidedly they don't want love.
Yep.
And they're
Some
the haters.
People are misandrous.
They're the fucking fascists. The people who don't want love are fucking fascists. And they're pretty easy to identify.
That's the word I'm looking for. The hatred of people. Just I don't remember.
I
don't think it's misandrist, because
it's
misanthropic.
Yeah. It's funny because I call my partner that all the time. He's not. He actually studied anthropology.
Oh, okay.
He just has a very because
that'll get you there if you study if you study the things that you really need to learn. It's just like, oh my God, people in large groups with bad leadership, they're doomed to fail a lot of the time.
And then just a shitty lens of analysis, right? Like, gosh, we have so much misinformation about the way people are and the way people were and what we understand about humanity. Sure. Because we had really stupid, for lack of they could have been less stupid, but really intellectual but ahistoric, ascientific people making observations, through a lens that is based on their positionality, and that still happens today. The media, for instance, saying, "Oh, these protesters," why isn't the media saying we as a society have this issue? The language of they. Pushes the responsibility off to somebody else. It is everybody's fucking responsibility, okay? To make sure that you're not racist, and that your family isn't racist, and that your boss isn't racist,
that you're anti-racist.
And that you're anti-racist.
Sure.
That you and we can't be not racist until we go through a period of being anti-racist. Just like we can't be wealthy until we go through a period of industrial production. It's just like so, and those are all revolutions, right? So I feel, and this is something, it's not I don't feel like, this is my primary orientation, is dude, we can't do anything without revolution. This is a revolutionary change in society. And people are oh, God, what does that mean? Oh. Yeah. And it's not guns, germs, and steel, man.
Yeah. I mean, Jared Diamond.
Yeah. It's, that is through the fucking positionality and lens of, white, Western, colonial, or settler colonial culture, right?
I think it's probably more like phones, mutual aid, and marches.
That's, communication, right? Mutual aid, commonality over difference. Community care. So not just mutual aid, we're going to help each other when we need it.
Sure.
But just an overarching feeling of community care and an understanding of that. That's a cultural thing. That doesn't come from government policy.
Sure.
So there's a reconciliation that has to happen. We can't policy ourselves out of white settler colonial racism and white supremacy. We're gonna have to deal with our own shit, people.
Sure. I think that's a great point, because if we really want to bring everybody into the conversations about making a better tomorrow, right? Which sounds really corny, but I mean it, building a future that's really meaningfully better than the one we live in today. One of the things I try to do, and I don't think I've done it enough, is I haven't had enough conservatives on the show, but I will. And Dylan Hudson was a really great conservative guest for anyone who wants to hear me speak to somebody who is more right-leaning. I would say that a lot of people get to voting staunchly Republican and voting for conservative principles because they just deeply distrust that the government can do anything right. And there's
that's a good logic. I know people who distrust the government so much that they're fuck the government at all costs, right? And there's a good reason to feel that way. How do you reach people who think that by adhering to conservative principles and voting Republican that they're somehow going to protect us from the failures of government? Well, first of all, fuck the dualism. Two
Sure.
wings, same bird, right? And all
Yep.
and those birds are shitting all over
Some
us.
of the local
you know?
Democrats are not a big fan of me because I call out some of their racism, frankly, that exists. There's a guy, gosh, I'm not going to use his name because I do want to patch things up with him because I think his head's in a good place. But he's racist as fuck, and he tries to, he like tried to tell me how to run my campaign because he's helped Senator Merkley before and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like he didn't think that I was doing a good job because I was like, speaking too divisively about like racial justice, basically. I don't want to misconstrue. But it was like, you need me, man, to come in and say, you need to communicate in this way. Your website needs to be like this. And basically telling me how to run my campaign. And you wouldn't believe how much I respectfully, because so much of the time for people of color, it's like we have to like fall on our own sword in order to like try to like, instead of just saying, hey man, you're being racist right now, like, which is a legitimate thing that people who are doing racist behaviors need to hear, frankly, but it's going to set people off, especially this person who's like powerful within the local Democratic Party. And so he like that would be the end of the world for him to even agree with a person of color who says that they did something racist. So my message to him was that conversation we had to me felt very mildly racist, which is like me tapering it way too much.
Yeah.
But then he just exploded on me like, clearly you can't take criticism, and you like, I thought that I was just going to try to help you, and now you don't want my help, so bye. And then he blocked me.
Don't play the race card. Hiura.
And that's like, it's also a misrepresentation of what I was doing, because I was telling him that was a very mildly racist conversation, and I in no way did I say I don't want your help. I probably could have used his help.
It's like microaggressive.
But he took that as like, oh, okay, fine. Like it's, because he just can't deal with being attached with that idea. He can't honestly face that was what was happening.
Yeah.
And from my point, yeah, dude, I don't want the help of somebody who's going to try to trample on the messages of people of color for the sake of like electoral politics. So I could have used your help, but only if you're willing to be an adult and actually be like, yeah, I own that. I own that my tone was not cool. I own that I pulled you aside when you were trying to like speak out for your message and tried to basically sanitize and whitewash it for this like electoral audience.
Town policing people of color, especially like highly educated, career focused, career oriented people of color is one of the main tools that oppressive society and white patriarchal Western capitalist hegemony uses to separate us from what should be like our mission of a sustainable world where we are all able to live freely.
The number one accomplishment that our mayor points to for talking about diversity and talking about inclusion is we've got this kindness campaign. We're a city of kindness, spreading kindness. And it's just like, you're not listening to the people who are basically telling you now is not the time for you to tell Eugene, which already has arguably too much kindness.
Yeah. Fuck politeness.
Exactly. That's the way forward for oppressed groups is let's all be more kind.
Yeah, it's like what you were getting at, and what you essentially articulated to me is like, it's always pressed upon people of color to move our barometer of acceptability, to meet people who are okay with the current state of oppression, okay with the status quo enough that, they want it to be comfortable enough for their lifetime. And they're scared of not even considering like what potential other options or what potential possibilities are out there, because from their position where they're sitting, they don't have a stake in the game of shit changing, right? Or not as big of a stake. But I'm here to let them know, and this is, this is part of my fuck politeness thing, is like, actually, you're fucking your kids up. Like you are leaving them in a position worse than, if you are a person who is okay with the status quo, okay with making people of color or trying to make people of color assimilate to your mean of normality, like, or acceptability, then you are fucking up the potential options and the possibilities of the future for your kids or for your grandkids, just so that you can stay comfortable and not have to deal with your shit for whatever time you have left on this mortal coil. And unfortunately, some of those people are like our age. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to call out boomers here, because it's like, I don't know. I have a lot of older folks who are my friends.
There's a lot of people in that generation who are very sick of the bullshit and are
and have
like
been fighting
some of the
their
best
whole
allies
lives, right?
here in Eugene, here across the country.
Have been fighting their whole lives.
Many of them have been in the military, and they're like, dude, I know that you're learning about how fucked up the system is, but if you're actually there with your boots on the ground, you will see how fucked up it is.
Like, I have a friend who's a boomer who votes Republican, right? I have a few of those. And this motherfucker has like always showed up for me if I ever needed it, is like really a good friend, is very respectful to me, but we disagree fundamentally on the approach to how we get there, right?
Sure.
And he thinks that, well, it's funny, the assumption that I voted Democrat was like one of the things that we actually like, one of the conversations, our first conversations. And I just checked him right there. I said, hey, just don't assume that I'm just going to vote for the Democratic Party because I'm black and that's what they tell you, black people do. First of all, but also, like, you think that voting for more of the same, or what you think is like hyper conservatism, reaching back for a period of time when growth was inherent, all that shit is going to preserve some like level of stability for us, but actually it's going to produce instability because the more you go in one direction without multiple entry points and avenues for converting your production or converting your whatever crap, I lost my train of anyways. So like, no matter how much you think that voting for one party or the other is going to preserve or maintain a status quo that this country is the richest country in the world and that this country has the most resources and we have the most choice, like, what you're doing is you're perpetuating a cycle that is bound to fail because it's an exploitative one, and as we talked about and we've mentioned several times, it's a finite sphere. And so the only thing that isn't finite is the people, right? So are we putting the people through a grinder now? Like, are we going to mine the people now? That's the inevitable next, amalgamation of how we achieve economic growth. Like, we can't do it. We're at the end of it.
Well, can I talk about parties for a second? Because
go ahead.
What I try to do is encourage people
to parties, because that's what I like.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, the revolution will be on the dance floor too.
It'll be fun.
Yes, absolutely. But political parties is what I was thinking about, because you're so right. And one of the things that, sadly, in the system where to be involved and make a governmental change here in town, you basically have to be a part, I don't want to diss the Democrats too much, but God, I got to do it sometimes, because I love the people who I've met through that. And I love a lot of people. I love a lot of our elected officials who are staunchly within the Democratic Party. And but my point is that vote blue no matter who promotes non-thinking. I want people to do much more thinking. So if you say, thoroughly research the candidates and here is a lot of information about every goddamn one of them, then if it's the case that it's all in partisan elections, somebody who is very progressive is probably going to end up voting for the Democrat every time anyway. I mean, there are going to be cases where they have an issue where they really disagree with a person, or they just like strongly think that this person's like a fake ally or something, and that's a real thing. But if you just do it based on the D or the R next to their name, that is, I mean, it's just like barely a step of not voting for me in terms of participating in democracy.
Well, there's about concentrations of power under wealth, right? The D and the R are like these massive organizations, these massive entities.
It's Coke and Pepsi. It's a fake conflict for money. Like they benefit off of each other, saying like they'll distract from what their own corruption is, and their own insider deals, and Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi on the Democratic Party just enriching themselves and doing all these stock trades based on the information they gleaned as congressmen and congresspeople, like fucking over the people basically, by just demonize the other side even harder.
Look, fuck the Democrats and fuck the Republicans. The Democrats are okay with making, concessions, with compromising with Republicans. People talk about bipartisan with Republicans even when it means people are going to die, you know? So like, I'm not trying to claim that I have some moral authority. I also do stupid shit in my life, but I sure as hell don't want to kill anyone. And I'm not going to do anything that's going to push the ball forward on that happening. And especially not like on a large scale. So in order to gain legitimacy in this political system, that, you know, you don't have to, but, you know, you should be one member of one of the two parties, right? Like this guy who you said was who you approached as mildly racist, just sounds like microaggressive fucking inability to reconcile with his own shit opinions. Sure. But so, you know, to gain that legitimacy, well, both of those are parties that operated all out war and murdered thousands of innocent and guilty people. Like, I'm just not about killing people, man.
Right.
You know, like,
right.
And so like I have a hard time even considering, you know, a Democrat a lot of times. And I, you know, there's been moments where I've been moved to vote that way,
right,
for some reason or another. But in general, I don't trust the politicians, and like at all. And I say that as somebody who ran a political campaign, and but I did it because I wanted to.
You didn't spend any money, did you?
$0.
Zero, like literally zero. For me, it was less than 700, so that's still nothing, and it's a drop in the bucket, but it's still way more than you.
I had almost 500 votes in my neighborhood, which is
you had more than 500 votes on the final tally.
Oh, really? I haven't even been paying attention. Over.
You got 7.56%, and I believe it was 506 votes.
Shit, man!
In the most crowded city council race, Ward 1, in recent history. For
I came in fourth. Yeah. Yeah. That's not too bad.
Yeah.
I didn't do any door knocking. I didn't do any signs. We couldn't, but I entered at the last possible minute. And the point of doing so was that I know that I'm not going to win, but let's start talking about the things that like actually will impact us more like over time in a more impactful way. You know, I want people to consider cultural reimagination. I want them to consider that it's not a post-revolutionary society, that we have a responsibility to the people who were here, that this land was stolen from, that we have a responsibility to the people who are here, and to the people who are going to be here for 7 generations or for however long.
I think we have a responsibility to Gianna Floyd, the daughter of George Floyd. Like literally she is there. She wants to be a doctor. Okay. And Kanye West actually has come around and done a lot of really powerful things recently that I noticed. And I believe he set up like fund for her to just straight up have, you know, all of her college funds paid for. And that's like, I'm not trying to like take from, cause you have a lot of big, broad ideas that are really powerful and important, but I'm also trying to just say like specifically that person we have a responsibility to.
Yeah. Like, we have actions that we can take to fulfill our responsibilities to each other on a really micro scale. You and I, you showed up on time. I was, of course, a little bit late.
Hey,
as
PCT.
I am.
I was a little bit late too.
Dude, I grew up in a Japanese household. Like, you know, we talked about that commonality. I felt so bad for being late.
I see koi fish on your leg.
Yeah.
People who are listening instead of watching on YouTube, sorry. Beautiful koi fish, you're missing out on it.
Yeah, don't look at my toes though, man, because I don't take care of that shit at all. Like, I'm a black mama. I work my ass off. I got 4 kids. I don't got time. I mean, I'm not saying that we all don't, but like me personally, I got a lot of shit going on. I don't have time to sit down and have nobody fuck with my toes. So I'll probably pay for that someday later in my life. But
for me, it's
if anybody wants to buy me a pedicure and do some of my work for about the hour that it takes to get that done, I'll go get a pedicure. Otherwise, don't talk shit on my toes. But I digress. So, you know, I grew up in this like Japanese household,
right on,
with this like with that cultural
here in Oregon or
black Japanese household. No, I mostly grew up in Kansas, but I'm an Air Force brat. And
nice.
I did. You know, we did some, of course, traveling around when you're with the military.
One of the biggest ways I made my campaign look like a joke inadvertently was I was telling people like, yo, first of all, It doesn't make sense to have the capital and where all three of our branches of government are located way over the fuck on the East Coast, where that used to be the population center. Now it's not the population center. So we should have at least the Congress. I'm not saying move the White House. I'm not saying move the Supreme Court, but Congress, where the representatives all go to and physically congregate at to make these decisions, should be in the center of the contiguous U.S., which is Kansas. And that, so I was telling people we got to move Congress to Kansas. That was when I was thinking about running for Congress, but then I kind of eased off of that. Because I was trying to be a little more practical. I like the difference between our approaches because you really were upfront about the fact that you knew you weren't going to win, and but you had messages to bring through the process and to bring to the community, and you want to keep moving that forward. For me, I was very, 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 I knew it was very unlikely for me to win. But I was still running. Did good. I was still running as if it was a possibility to win because I believe in Eugene enough to be like, "Yo, let's reject this." I don't want to sound sour grapes. Some people are like trying to get me to like continue my campaign as a write-in candidate, but because there's people who really want to have a write-in candidate.
Yeah, but there's real work to be done, and fuck the politics. You know what I mean? So like I'm oriented because like. I study a lot of revolutionary theory and I try to like make everything I say as accessible as possible for everybody because unfortunately our education system in this country has fucking failed us. And so people don't have like a grasp of language. I just happen to have the privilege of growing up in a multicultural household, having traveled all, in different places in the world and being exposed to different languages, the way people approach communication, that sort of stuff. So I just want it to be as accessible as possible for the person who got left the fuck behind, right. Or for people.
We're the wealthiest country in the history of the world. I was just listening to M5 Vibe, he's a local rapper who was on Talks with Tiger with my friend Tiger Gruber, and he was talking about how when he was living for 2 years in Germany, people were telling him, "Yeah, we basically just didn't pay to go to college. We got our college education free." He thought they were joking.
No, it's real.
No, it's totally doable.
It's real. My friend, her son has dual citizenship. She's a German citizen.
Nice.
And he went to school here, or he's graduating this year, and he's going to college in Germany.
Right.
For free.
Right.
And
that's one of the tricks of American exceptionalism. It's got us so convinced based on like red and blue iconography and eagles that we are just the best. And we are not the best simply because we are just the best. Like you got to qualify that statement.
Yeah. What the fuck is the best?
Where's our healthcare system and our education system that is actually making us the best?
Well, yeah. See, so those things don't have the economic motivational
and that's coming from someone who loves the U.S.
of being like inherently profitable, right?
Right.
Like, so they are left to the services sector, and this is why people don't believe the government can do anything, because the government is populated by elected representatives who are from generally one or two party, this dualistic notion of this binary, but all of them operate under the same assumption that you have to be, in order for something to be successful or for somebody to be willing to do it, there has to be some additional consideration for them. Like if you're not getting something, something from nothing out of the exchange that you're doing, if it's just for the sake of doing it because it's necessary, then it's not a viable concept. Like it's not a viable goal or something that is attainable. People won't put in the effort toward that end because they're not motivated. And I just challenge that whole notion because we're all motivated to survive.
Yes.
Like what? On the
That's actually why I love the Saw films, because they open that up in a really grisly way. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I have issues with the cinematography in those films, but okay. And a lot of other issues. The color
correction, they're just like, we're going to make this shot all yellow. We're going to make this shot all green. And then lots of blood splatter.
I guess to sort of like, round out that point is like, think about it conversely. Like if extra consideration for everything that you do, everything that you put your labor and efforts into is the primary motivating factor for people to do shit, then explain fucking wage labor.
Right.
Explain why people like me and you and everybody else in the working class, explain why black people for even less, and why people of color and women for even less than what the stated mean of wage labor can actually attain, still do it. Why do we still engage in it then? Because we have, as our basic fundamental biological imperative, survival.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
I understand people caring and wanting to reach for a society or for a situation, a status quo where where they are existing in a space that's like dignified and post that survival like layer or notion of like the hierarchy of needs, right?
Sure.
Where full self-realization.
Sure.
But they're
Top
doing
of the pyramid.
it on the backs of other people because in order for you to achieve that, people think that you have to be able to extract, usurp extra, so that you can accumulate wealth, which is how you get power. And I say fuck all that. Bam all that. I'm not saying it's wrong to like want to floss and like have nice things and to like look good and to have what you need.
A lot of my favorite hip hop is about that.
What is this notion that you have to have more than what you need, and that is that is success. That is the goal. That's the motivation. That's what we teach people in schools.
Well, there's not a lot of correlation between being super wealthy and being like mentally super happy. Yeah,
I mean, there's a limit.
Exactly, absolutely. Once you get to a certain point where you have much more than you need, I think you start to feel shame about that.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on what people feel, but I'm just saying there's a marginal effectiveness and benefit of every dollar that you accumulate in wealth. And after a certain point, the marginal effectiveness starts to diminish and then it goes down to zero. Just like all profits are supposed to in the long run. The reason that is because you can't just keep perpetually feeding into a function, a framework that has functionally like achieved the stated goal and is no longer like functionally necessary, right? And I said function a lot because I'm like, there's function, like a mathematical function, and then there's functionally, like, does it fucking work?
Right. Right.
And on both of those fronts, like the perpetual, continuation of something that is like obsolete until the last possible drop of profit is extracted from it is something that we just don't talk about. It's something that we don't think about. So it's like going back to this idea from the initial question, which is like, what's an unpopular opinion you have? Perpetual growth. Fuck perpetual growth. Like, we're not growing our souls and spirits as humans. We're growing this shit that's killing us, And so I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal,
Libertarian.
Green, most people
families.
are centrists, but honestly, I don't think most people are any of that.
That's why Obama won.
All of
us. He picked Biden and then went for the heartland.
All of us are survivors. So whether you're a centrist or like me, an anarcho-communist,
Wow,
you have
anarcho-communist.
Yeah. Oh, hey, by the way, Eugene, I'm an anarcho-communist. Please don't kill me, fascists. That's seriously like the level we're on right now,
Right.
And it's been...
I love that. Like, maybe unpack that a little bit, because people are really convinced that communists support like a strong central government based on, they always go to like China as an example, or Russia and the
Soviet
Union. But like, so anarcho-communist seems like it's a lot about people spreading wealth and opportunities and taking care of their communities, but not doing it from a authoritarian governmental standpoint.
Sure. So like, I just, it's just about the material reality that we live in, right? I think I orient myself in communism not just from like this Marxist lens. I orient myself in communism as like an ultimate egalitarian way of organizing our economic functions and our agreements as a society, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the egalitarianism achieved in that comes from participation of people, right? So participatory democracy, or decision making, for lack of I hate democracy. This idea is like the rule of the majority, right?
Okay.
So like that is kind of where that anarchist sway comes from.
You just came on my show and said you hate democracy.
Yeah.
You're okay with that?
I know it's a really unpopular opinion. It's not that I hate people having the right to vote and enfranchisement. I think it's a shallow form of enfranchisement.
Okay.
I think that
super shallow.
Yeah,
That's why I support a better voting situation, like ranked choice voting or star voting.
Yeah, I mean, dude,
we get scared out of voting for who would actually be able to pull us out of our shit.
We literally have the math,
right.
That tells us that the way that we vote in a dualistic binary sort of scenario for one of two parties, and we only get one vote.
Yeah.
And on a larger scale, we don't even get one vote per person. Like, we know, we have the economic research and we have the understanding through game theory and through behavioral research theory that actually is a disenfranchising, catalyst.
Sure.
Like, people feel hopeless, or they feel as if what they have to contribute, if all they have to contribute is just a vote, then they really don't that there's no point in doing it. And then it's a dampening effect on people's willingness to engage with the civic society, with the civilization that they live in. What I talk about in participatory democracy is people actually coming together and talking about what is going on and saying, okay, well, we may not have all the answers, but from where I sit, this is what, documenting, recording what it means, or what people are actually thinking, what people would like to have, where people want to go, what grievances they experience, their histories, just their stories, what we can understand from where people sit and what has happened to them in their lives, and people engaging together on the layers of society and the levels of society where they exist.
Right.
So through your labor, through your neighborhood, through, your church organizations, your other civic organizations, through your your football club that you inhabit, your gun club.
Well, I like where you're getting, because a lot of our conversation has been you're a really brilliant person, and you use words that are people might have to look up, and that's great. But
is it?
I think. Have you ever felt that before? Like people have ever accused you or said that you're really academic in your explanations of things?
And it sucks because I am, and I know it, and
but that's okay.
And the person I talk to the most, especially during this coronavirus pandemic, is my partner, and we are both social scientist oriented people who have had shared the last decade together, so we have this shared language.
Awesome.
And that's what you get at, right?
Right.
A lot of. And so I think, go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, there's a lot of you probably recognize some privilege in being able to get that training to be able to have that kind of a discourse.
Dude, I hustled my ass off to get that.
That too.
Yeah.
That too. Absolutely. Hustle and privilege. But now I feel weird about being here. Yeah, you're privileged.
No, I am. I'll tell you what my privileges are, but go proceed.
So I'm not even just saying in layman's terms, in lay people's terms, but let's say in the ideal world that you're talking about, or the ideal Eugene that you're talking about, you're walking from West Eugene, let's say West 11th, way down there where, I don't know, currently the Walmart and the Target are, and you're going to walk from there to downtown, to the Lane County Government Building. What do you see that's different as you're doing that walk?
What do you mean, like the visual differences?
Yes. If we are 20 years from now, we have really course corrected and we've done things that build towards a more positive communitarian society. What are you not seeing in that walk?
Well, first of all, nobody's homeless. Okay, that's the first things first. Goddamn, how hard is it? This is a big ass country.
Sure.
and we have enough space, but everything's owned, so people don't have space.
Right.
I see more relaxed people, working people happier because their labor, whatever level of labor they're doing, is not the thing that secures their survival. Like, their survival is inherent. We have a collective agreement that, like, we have a responsibility to make sure, as to the best of our ability, that we're not killing each other, and that also that if somebody is suffering and having a difficulty surviving, that, like, we help them.
Right.
So that what do I see? I see, like, green spaces incorporated into what was formerly not green spaces.
Okay.
Because we just need to be able to clean the air. And we have a responsibility to this very special atmosphere, or to maintain this very special atmospheric conditions that keep us being able to exist on this planet.
The organization 350?
Yeah.
And they're like, let's 350 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere is a pretty bad tipping point. We're at 417 now. So we're way past it, and that does not mean just throw our hands up in the air and give up. That means all hands on deck to fucking end this stuff.
Dude, I got kids, man.
Of course.
Everything that motivates me to do this is, like, I've always said, like, I don't think that the things that I want to see will happen in my lifetime, and I've self-corrected on that more recently because I believe that, honestly, nature prevails. But it's not like, but the things that I don't want to see is the people who are already vulnerable, the people who are already marginalized, at risk, suffering, struggling to achieve the basic, necessities to survive, to be in a position to be more desperate, which, and then disappear because Killer Mike, the new album RTJ3, but also just
RTJ4.
RTJ4. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm still
Holy
so.
Calamafuck was one of my favorite songs. Let's start talking about music soon.
Okay,
yeah.
soon. Yeah, because I got a lot of things I got on my plate. We can talk forever.
Hell yeah.
But what I want to see is intergenerational communities and collaboration because people don't get that anymore. We're so alienated from the land. I was talking, my partner and I were talking last night, like, it's a really rare thing in this country to still be tied to the land. And what I mean by tied to the land is that you have, like, an ancestral home, essentially. If you're extremely wealthy, there's likely generational wealth that would be, and, that you might say, well, it's enough generations that this is, like, our home, but it's not your ancestral home.
Sure.
So I'm not saying that poor Appalachians have their ancestral home in Appalachia, but it is about the damn closest thing I've ever seen to Americans, saying, this is my home place. Like, this is, as far as I understand, this is where my people are.
Yeah.
And it's not because of, like, definitely a lot of it is, but it's not, like, as much of a concentration because of exploitation. It's like because they got there and they just stayed there. I don't want to romanticize it all because fuck the Romans too. But like,
seriously.
But so ultimately, like, being for me, like, reaching toward that intergenerational familiarity, the idea that, like, there is a cultural thread that ties you to the land, that lets you know that there's functional and fundamental ways of survival and being together, and a responsibility of a community to, like, formulate something that works despite ineffectiveness and ineffectuality of the government, their non-interest in you, or oppression from, like, economic players and actors, or the theft of the land. Like, it's just, like, an understanding this idea that, like, the way we live is something that you reach back and take from history.
Sure.
That's why, like, I talk about decolonization, right? I talk about that not just to be, to revere Native American ways of life, beliefs, mysticism, and all of that. Like, natives, yes, absolutely. Like, I'm part Native somewhere. I'm talking about the cutting of our cultural threads from our ethnicity that frustrates and complicates the way that we survive. You know, so thinking about cultural reimagination in that way is like, my people were taken from like somewhere on the coast of West Africa and brought over here to do labor. And then my other people were already here. And as far as I know, we're oriented down in the Gulf Seminole, people, the unconquered people, just resistant, right? And then my other people are from Japan, post-imperialist, post-World War II, war marriage, made from the U.S. Occupation of Japan, brought my grandmother here, Kazuko. I bet where's your grandma from?
Hamamatsu, maybe Osaka, actually.
Oh.
That's where she met her.
So they weren't together during the war?
No, actually, I don't really know.
No.
Sadly, I need to brush up more on that history.
Our grandmas, right?
Okay.
I had the benefit of having her stories, right? I had the benefit of like growing up understanding that like during World War II, she hid in Mount Fuji, And then I talked to a friend of mine the other day who is also Japanese American, and we were talking about like just, our grandmas and the stories, and they're like, yeah, I think during the war she was in Mount Fuji. I was like, where were they? My grandma's from Yokohama. Her grandma is from like that, across the island, and so not Tokyo, so like, they were children at the time when we were, dropping the A-bombs on Japan. It's like the stories that I have, like the understanding of
Fuji-san wa sugoku kirei desu. Mount Fuji is gorgeous.
Yes.
Actually, I was just listening to Bakari Sellers on Yang Speaks, a different podcast today. I listen to podcasts a lot. And he was talking about high-speed rail and just how it's amazing, and it warps your sense of time because of how much people can cover ground in these East Asian countries where it's well-developed, and we just don't have that here. Our infrastructure is falling apart in this country. And I'm just remembering when I was on the Shinkansen in Japan, just seeing Mount Fuji out the window, and it's just every bit as beautiful as all the famous paintings and photos show.
Right. So like that's where my people are tied to the land, and like for whatever reason, like I was a small child when I was in Japan, but I've always felt this orientation, this thread that ties me to Mount Fuji, like understanding, and so like just that basic fundamental thing being stripped from us alienates us from part of our humanity, like putting our feet on the ground. And if you think about that, and then all of the layers upon like where in our lives or where in our history that is happening constantly on a mass scale to all people around all the time,
sure.
And that's the mechanism and mode of, this model of ownership in the modes of production, that like we have a lot of fucking work to do, but mostly what we need to do is take a step back and realize who the fuck we are. As humans, and realize what it means to be on this fucking planet. And then, so at that point, the color of your skin, the importance of that starts to wither away. Because it's like, no, I have a tie to the land. I understand why my skin is this color.
Sure.
I understand why somebody else's skin is a different color. Do you know why white people have white skin?
Because they spent less time outside when they were evolving.
It's because, we all come from Africa, right? The cradle of civilization.
And there's less sun farther from the equator.
Yeah. So it's about vitamin D absorption.
Sure.
Right? Like, it's about how much vitamin D you actually need to have the energy that you can do that you need to do all the things you need to do to function and survive. It's about the viability of your offspring, because vitamin D is very important,
Sure.
in pregnancy. And so, like, white people, Europeans, I don't know what they were. They're cavemen. My partner's the anthropologist. I'm not. So like their babies were not viable. They weren't being born viably because they were living in places that were kind of like, England, for instance,
okay.
The Nordic regions, right? So they just didn't have enough sun, so their skin lightened so they could absorb more vitamin D from the sun. And that, I don't remember what condition it is, and I'm sure somebody can comment on here and look it up. But it's like, that's what made their skin white.
Because we are all descendant from, I think it's the Khoisan people in Africa.
Yeah. Okay. Cradle of civilization, right? So like, that's what made their skin white. Because we are all descendant from, I think it's the Khoisan people in Africa. Yeah. Cradle of civilization, right? So like, that's what made their skin white. Because we are all descendant from, I think it's the Khoisan people in Africa. Yeah. Okay. Cradle of civilization, right? So like, And it's funny because my partner's gonna make fun of me if when he listens to this. He'll be like, you know it is. And I just want to like, he's right over there, and I just want to be like, hey, could you remind me of what that disease is? But I'm sure it'll be a fun little research project for somebody. So the point is that like that's all it is. It's just a function of like how we fucking absorb the sun. But so when people say like race is a social construct, they're right. The everything about how race functions in our society is constructed because somebody stood to benefit from making that construct.
Of course.
Right? And we know who did, and we don't have to go into all of that. But the biological difference is not about like supremacy or superiority. It's about the orientation of where our ancestral homes are.
Sure.
And the understanding
it's very phenotypical. It's very, very
exactly.
like surface level stuff.
Exactly. And so like I would say, tangentially or like to contextualize that where I think about that from is like I went to Bolivia and did some research, some economic research for an agricultural export chamber. I mean, it wasn't like my ideal situation, but I did get a lot of insight into like what was going on there agriculturally, which is really tied to everything, of course. But there, my partner was with me at the same time, and he was studying Andean anthropology and archaeology. And up in La Paz and anywhere with a high altitude, the womb, the uterus, and the amniotic sac of a developing fetus of a woman's developing fetus
Sure.
is a little like there is a difference in the way that their amniotic sacs function to accommodate for the high altitude and the way you breathe in your atmosphere. So it's like our bodies are functions of nature. Like we can't avoid that.
Sure.
And so let's just get down to that base level. But,
one of the things that makes me think of, and then I do want to ask you about music, and then ask you the last question, because out of respect for both of our times, yours probably more than mine.
Okay.
We can't escape the nature that has evolved us to the point we're at now. So one of the things, it's great how connected we are and how easy it is to live alone and be very learned through the internet and get your food delivered to you and stuff, but. Historically, if you were separated from why we experience loneliness is because if you were separated from the pack, it meant you were going to die. So we evolved to experience that as being a threat. So sometimes you just you spend all day alone and you're just like, wow, I wish I had a hug right now. Or like you don't realize why you're feeling this way. And it tends to lead you to continue to scroll, or maybe I'm speaking from my own perspective here, but like continue to go to those coping mechanisms that can lead you to spend a whole day without really connecting with anybody.
Well, yeah, and the narrative that we live under doesn't provide us the answers as to why that is. Like that, and I know that. But the concept and the question of alienation is like not something that we talk about.
Sure.
And we don't talk about it because it's a Marxist identification. Like.
There are also a lot of industries that are selling us the solutions to these problems, whether it's through a pill or a product. So, I mean, they don't want to talk about the, just like go take a walk for like a while with your friend or with your dog.
Yeah,
anyway,
or with your grandma.
Yeah, exactly. Your grandma.
Go visit your grandma, motherfuckers. Yeah. They have stories. That shit is important.
I love that. That would be a great podcast, just talking to grandmas about their stories. So if you were on a desert island and you had one album, or let's say even 2 or 3 albums.
Shit, don't do that to me.
I'm doing it.
What?
Because I'm trying to condense this conversation. Suicide.
One
Is that
album?
an album?
No,
Okay.
I would just kill myself. Fuck it, dude. Like, I don't know. I'm not talented enough to like make music, so.
Okay. You'd get there.
Sorry.
You'd adapt.
Trigger warning.
You understand that it's a jumping off question for a conversation.
Right.
So like what music has inspired, motivated, pushed you to be who you are today, or do you turn to when you really need solace?
Wow. So it just like depends on what time in my life you're talking about. But today I listen to a lot of like radical hip hop, but like today that's what I listen to, mostly punk rock and radical hip hop.
Give me artists.
Oh, Jean Grey and Kel Chris, man.
Ooh, Kelly Chris.
That Everything's Fine album blew my mind.
So great.
And Jean Grey, she's fucking brilliant and everything. Like she's like a master wordsmith, samurai ass. I don't even know, like, what, you know, she's just a producer, she's everything, right? Like, and she's so profound, like, really think about, like,
I think Open Mike Eagle is on that album on a track or two. Met him, he's come through Eugene a few times and done shit with my friends, and he's hilarious on Twitter, and it's been great to see him get more success with like Comedy Central and stuff, but he's awesome. I really like him.
Yeah,
I'm more familiar with him than Jean Grey and Chloe.
You know, Kel Chris just dropped a new album, right?
Oh shit!
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's such a good name too, and I feel like I should do it some respect. I like an artist, and I just put their music on and I play. I don't even look at the names of the tracks.
Sure.
I just like play albums throughout because I feel like that's their vision. So like,
sure.
For whatever amount of time I have.
That's awesome. I feel that way
a lot
too.
Of course I'm listening to that new RTJ. I always listen to RTJ.
My God, so good.
That shit dropped. It is so hard. Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollars. Shit. We paid for that shit, motherfuckers. That's what they're saying.
My friend texted me and he was like, can't be a Pharrell feature without that 4-count intro. Doom, doom, doom.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Oh, they built these cages to keep somebody in them. You think when they're done with me, they're not going to come for you? You know, like that's some like fucking, I mean, I'm paraphrasing obviously because I'm not Killer Mike or LP, but
right.
You know. So that's like been really impactful. I love Death Grips.
Nice.
You know, like that's really my shit.
MC
like,
Ride.
And you know,
innovative shit.
Saul Williams. You know,
yes.
And I'm waiting, like, where are you, Saul Williams? I know, like, it would be I would be super honored if he even, like, heard that I shouted him out. You know, what an influential, phenomenal, like, instrumental poet in this times to keep up the pressure, to keep, you know, us moving forward in, you know, this, like, the realm of thoughts that we can try to achieve, like the challenging of the narrative, the status quo, criticism, those sorts of pieces. Saul Williams is so epic and so poetic. And obviously,
one of my favorite poets is George Watsky, and he's a big Saul Williams fan.
I don't know George Watsky. I'm gonna check him out now.
He's amazing.
And let's see, like, so I feel like I love punk rock music. Was like who I kicked it with a lot, you know,
Sweet.
Primarily back in Kansas. It's so aggressive and critical, and like also like in a sense like it comes from a place of love, which is like where I feel like a lot of the aggression of marginalized people and classes is like, why don't you love us? You expect us to love you. Why don't you fucking love us back?
Yeah,
you know?
Or why don't we? Why do you expect this default participation in the culture that you know, like dominant culture?
A reverence for it.
Yeah, exactly.
A reverence for the culture that fucking kills us. You know, like why would we have that? So like punk rock is just so defiant and so right there. But like honestly, I'm too busy to like be in a scene, and unfortunately people throw punk rock shit at me, new stuff, because like I feel like most of like where I get my new stuff from that is like live and in person. And there's so much that's like wrapped up in that subculture community too. So like of like that part of it, that needing to be in person and together to like experience that, that is like really profound to me. So you know, so throw me some shit, but like I love like the Stormtroopers.
You should check out. My friends are in a band called Dead Fucking Serious, and they made an album called Peril, and it's an amazing punk rock album.
Yeah,
a little bit punk, a little bit hardcore. Yeah,
Afro-punk. Like I've never been able to go. I don't get to travel very much.
Man,
I can work hard, working class people. You know what I mean? I'm trying to get there. I've been trying to win tickets for years.
Yeah. They always have incredible lineups.
Right. Yeah. And you know, like, but everything for me reaches back to and you know grasps this concept of like soul music.
Nice.
You know, so like that's where I really came up. Soul and jazz. That's what I was raised listening to.
Lovely.
So you know, yeah. I mean, my family. My grandpa used to sing to me all the time.
Nice.
Like just, you know, he didn't know the lyrics to most songs, but he knew like the refrain, and he would make up his own lyrics, and I would like laugh at him and stuff.
Yeah.
But so like, you know, I'm oriented in that soul place. And so when I guess for solace, like I look back and I'm like, oh, let's listen to some Nina Simone. Like honestly, at the most fucking difficult, gut-wrenching times in my life, which I am a really resiliently happy person.
Awesome.
Like, I find joy and gratitude in almost anything, like even pain, even the struggle that I've been through. Even
one of my favorite variants on Black Lives Matter is Black Joy Matters, because that puts it in such a direct connotation to just like happiness and like the basic infrastructure around being able to be happy.
How can motherfuckers hate us when no matter what, like after everything we've been through, after coming to this motherfucker, after coming to this place, we still continue to fucking, operate as a community, as a black community, the black community in our various communities from a place of joy.
Sure.
Like that creation, that like impartial.
I mean, a lot of the country's watching Fox News, and they never want to highlight that stuff. Their view on hip hop, which is such bullshit. They'll never put on a Chance album. The Big Day was a Chance album that got shit on because he was happy, and it's like that's so sad. They'll just talk about, oh, it's angry, oh, it's like destructive, and it's just
speaking of Pharrell.
yeah.
Oh shit! I'm sorry. That was probably really fucking loud.
No, it's good. I got it tapered down.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I got that laugh right. So like, speaking of Pharrell, that song, right? Like, what a great song. Yeah. What a fucking like objectively just beautiful song and concept. Happy, and then listening to him talk about how like he practices gratitude as a practice. As a personal spiritual practice.
People who are only peripherally Pharrell fans too got to check out NERD and see how dope he is as a drummer and a multi-instrumentalist. That person is just out of this world with talent.
So yeah, so it's funny how universally like celebrated that song when it was kind of like the hey ya of whatever, like a couple of years ago.
2016.
You even had like old white ladies doing the happy dance and stuff.
Jack Black's in the video, which I like. Oh wait, no, that's the Weird Al Tacky version.
I don't know videos, man. Okay. I don't hardly ever get to watch anything, like except films. I do make time for films, like when.
Hey, we just made a film. That's what I like to think about this as, because we're hitting almost an hour and a half.
Shit.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, whenever you like. I would say that
it's a documentary. It's just a one-shot documentary.
Is Fox News talking about that song? Like this? Did they ever like? I would love to know somebody. If you're fucking a nerd and have like a lot of free time, I'm gonna forget this. So look it up. Drop it in the comments. Like, did that song or a sample of that track or anything ever get like played on Fox News as a clip, in any way, because it was so popular, and that's the thing, is like popular culture, man. It's like, even if you're not part of that, there is this like sense of it, right?
Sure.
Like it's in the back of your mind now. It becomes part of your, I don't know. Anyways. MF Doom.
MF Doom.
The reason I think about that is because that first sample on Deep Fried Friends is from the very first airing of the Weather Channel.
Oh, really?
Like that. That he was like right there, like that shit is from the Weather Channel from the very first day. Like, and I'm just like, dude, fuck you. Like,
that's
and Houdini,
beautiful.
Like let's just
Houdini. Friends.
How many of us have them? Friends. Yeah, and so like soul, funk, jazz is an American invention just as much as I am. Wouldn't exist without this country. Me and jazz, So like, but all of that shit is also black culture, by the way.
Yep.
Cultural products produced by people that people are happy to shuck and jive to, and I'm talking about white people.
It's funny how The Message is like one of the earliest hip hop songs. It's like people think of as a song that was a reality rap about like the black struggle and the urban struggle at the time, but it sounds happy as shit. Like instrumentally, just to be able to like musically, just to be able to pervade the get to where it did as a groundbreaking piece of music. I just feel like it's way happier sounding and like major chords.
I mean, that's why you can dance to it, right? Like if we just toiled and like sunk ourselves into the despair of our fucking reality, and especially when so much of it is constructed, like as a black people, we wouldn't exist. You know, but why are beats from Africa still one of them, like still like at the forefront, the most prevalent fucking like thing that exists in music today? Like bluegrass music has African fucking beats, you know. Mariachi, like all of everything is like reaching back to those fundamental rhythms from Africa, and maybe it's just like something, they're just fundamental, these rhythms, you know, like they're like something.
Keeps you going.
I don't know. You're the musician. I'm not. Like, I haven't studied music extensively, but it's just like, how many beats can you actually make? Like, is there different, you know?
Everything is a remix of a remix.
Exactly. So like, but it's a remix of a remix of a remix of some shit that they try to take from us. They try to take our fucking music from us, and it's still here.
You're not an Elvis fan? What are you talking about?
It's that persistent. Well, no, I mean, they take this shit and capitalize on it, but I mean, it's like, you know, in Brazil, fucking slaves couldn't practice their African people could not practice their fucking like martial arts or any fighting styles when they were brought. So the capoeira, you know, exists.
Okay.
The drums were seen as something that could be a potential threat because of the messaging possibilities out of drums. So like they had to be, you know, utilize the utilization of drumming and the rhythms of Africa had to be you know, shielded or disguised by like religious practice, you know, within religious practice, hence gospel, hence, you know, so all of those things. And so like these are unconquered cultural threads that we still have, that we still live in today. And in fact, a lot of motherfuckers make a lot of money off of, you know, like, and I'm so proud of musicians because they're like, nah, I'm recognizing this. And so like it's becoming where it became more concentrated, the music industry.
Another thing I'm proud of with the campaign I ran for mayor of Eugene was that, like, you know, I'm being told like, oh, you're running too much of a left field, like weird issues, like, and I was talking, I had a lot of, like, I had art policies. I had a full 8-part policy plan about art and about performers and about musicians, and trying to like a lot of these like venues have not had much reason to celebrate City of Eugene policymaking, and like food and beverage establishments and like people that put on shows, stand-up comedy, all this stuff. And
it's hard to survive
honestly here. History proved me right a little bit, because when COVID hit, those are some of the most marginalized and most affected communities as performing artists, so people who make our life worth living. So I have no regret over the fact that I put that right up alongside housing and mental health and you know, transportation as things that we need to look at.
Protection and space for people making art and making the culture is like mandatory. You know, people are worried about communism making us all wear gray jumpsuits and, you know, having no joy and that sort of shit. But at least, you know, like, I mean, but they're not even looking at the reality of right now, like the rent is too damn high in Eugene to create art. For a lot of people,
we got to make that party happen, that political party. The rent is too damn high party.
I mean, it already exists. Like, you're just talking about bringing it back. Like, right. I'm down for solidarity platform, you know, taking on that fucking meme, right? That cultural meme. And just, but it's not a meme, it's a reality. Like, the rent is so high. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. The rent is dirt cheap there. Do you know how much art people make? Do you, like, you know, like, do you know how much free art there is to experience? How much access to materials there are? How much music is coming out of that place? Beautiful. You know, and
Wichita.
Yeah, I'm from Wichita. Wow, it's a big ass music scene, big ass art scene. And the rent is dirt fucking cheap. Like I have a house that's half the size of the one I rented in Wichita, and it cost, or that house was twice as big, and it cost half as much as this house that I rent here. So like, amazing. But, you know, there's always a trade-off, right? You know, like there's also an oppressive police state.
Damn, we didn't even talk about gentrification, but we got a lot of Californians coming in to once they've accrued, you know, six-figure savings and living out here in Eugene, and it's spiking the rent up for people who, you know, grew up here.
They passed. They're ethnically like innocuous, right? Like, they lived in a place where they had an opportunity to operate on an economic scale that was above and beyond other people's. That's one of the reasons I moved to the West Coast, is because we were living in Kentucky. And I was like, I love Kentucky, dude. But you know what? I can never make enough money here as a black woman with my skill set, doing the things that I care about doing, to be able to like branch out and go anywhere.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying never, but the likelihood is low. So if I start from this economic position here in Eugene, where things are just more expensive, the amount that I make, like if I decided to check the fuck out, I could walk away and have enough to survive somewhere else.
Beautiful.
Not conversely. So
beautiful.
So yeah. So the music, right? So for me,
awesome.
Music is life.
Well, the last question I always ask people is, and you can interpret this however you want, what's one way we could all be a little less stupid?
Gosh, one way. I guess I would say, like, listen to other people, right?
Yes.
And this is not one way, right? Like, this is not one way. Like, I guess be okay with fucking up and be real comfortable with apologizing, you know, for your mistakes, but also
so important.
Be real comfortable with accepting apologies, you know?
Yeah.
Like, because that's the great fear, right? Is a great fear of people is
I feel like holding grudges is a little bit about power. Like, oh, I have power over this narrative and this situation because this person did something bad to me, or this person thinks I did something bad and I'm not going to apologize because it's going to be a reduction in my power or something. And that happens in spaces where we all feel disempowered, is like we cling to what we have. But no, you got to let go of that. There is so much more to be gained out of genuinely reconciling out of negative vibes.
Well, I mean, if you don't like somebody, you don't like them.
Sure,
right?
You don't have to.
But you should be able to have that conversation and not mean that you have to kill each other.
Right.
You know, like, just because I don't like you doesn't mean I want you dead. So, like, if that's a fucking message I have to put out there, like, really, it's fascist. Like, that fucking fuck with me the most. Like, because here we are screaming for our lives. And yeah, some people fuck some shit up and they're going to get dealt with. And they got dealt with. But, like, wanting to kill us rather than wanting to hear us, you know, and figure out, like, what we could do better moving forward, is just, like, there's that, like, they have blinders on and their ears are shut. And
I like when you said listen to other people, because you didn't say a certain kind of other people. You didn't say, you know, you just basically said other people implies that they have a different experience than you that you can learn from. That's it. It's important.
Like, even this moment, like how we experience this conversation, I'm expecting a debrief, right? Like, no,
when the camera's off,
really, like, we don't.
I'm probably gonna go straight home and get this ready to put out tomorrow.
We don't have alienation, like, because of alienation and like the exploitation of our labor. We don't have enough time to unpack that shit. So I guess my dream society is an age of leisure, one where, like, we realize that we've achieved this, like, technological capacity and ability for people to just take a fucking break and
Killer
sit
Mike
down
talks about that a lot
and look at each other.
We shouldn't have jobs. We should all just be chilling.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, that's fucking economic theories and principles, founding ones, classical and neoliberal and Marxist and, you know, primitive economics, for lack of a better term. I hate the fucking word primitive.
Have you seen his trigger warning show?
You know, like I said, I don't get to watch much. I did see, like,
great.
a couple of episodes. The one
Church
on,
of
like,
Sleep. He has he's got a friend named Sleepy, and he's amazing.
Well, I'm a tourist, so I've always got to be doing shit all the time.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for taking time to do this. This was a really wonderful conversation.
Shit, dude. We could hang out.
Yeah, we're homies now.
We're homies.
All right.
All right, Thomas. No, thank you for having me. Folks, stay safe out there, please.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Nazis and
do you want to plug anything? Anything that you're
killing
doing?
People.
Yes. I guess plugging that is important.
You know, like, could you stop killing other fucking Americans and other people in general? Do I want to plug something right now? No, because, well, yes, I do, because deregulation is a thing that we're actually facing, and, like, it is interlinked with everything, like industrial deregulation as a policy. So deregulate and die. That's what we fucking have to face. Stop being racist or die.
What do you
or
mean
kill.
by industrial deregulation?
Yeah, Trump believes that by deregulating industries in terms of their responsibilities to the planet, it's like that's how we're gonna foster economic recovery. It's gonna help the stock market, but it's not the economics is. I don't know. Anyways.
One of my favorite quotes I heard recently from Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty. Crystal got it from somewhere else. The stock market is a graph of how rich people are feeling.
Yeah.
It's a graph of rich people's feelings.
It's a graph of how rich people think that their process and fucking orientation of exploitation is gonna go for in the short and long term.
Amazing.
So when the stock market does better, that means they think that they can exploit us better. That's the whole thing. It's like they have this belief not that things are gonna get better and that things are gonna be more humane, but that their ability to exploit us will continue for the foreseeable future, right?
They've had plenty of reason to think that. Based on what the structures that they and their, forefathers have reified for them to be able to do that.
In the long run, all profits return to zero, and it's either going to be nature or fucking the people who do that, right? Mm-hmm. We don't want it to be nature, because that means we're gone. Mm-hmm. So, let it be
beautiful.
The people.
All right. This has been wonderful. Thanks for those who stuck through it to the end, and we'll see you next week.
Sorry I stutter, motherfuckers.
You are one of the most
I love you all.
Well-spoken people on the pod.
I love you all, and I really fucking mean it. Even the assholes.
Hell yeah. Gotta love the assholes. Peace.